Welcome to the Leap Hour, where inspiring leadership meets real-world impact. Hosted by Steve Farber, acclaimed author of The Radical Leap, this show brings you face-to-face with visionary leaders who embody the art of leading with love, energy, audacity, and proof. In each episode, Steve dives deep into the journeys of remarkable individuals who've embraced extreme leadership to ignite change, spark innovation, and inspire others to greatness. These are the game changers, the risk takers, and the leaders who prove that heart and courage can change the world. This is the Leap Hour, and the conversation starts now.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me again on the Leap Hour. This is Steve Farber. I'm coming to you live from Kansas City, where I've been living now for 2 years. Moved here from San Diego 2 years ago. San Diego to Kansas City. Moved here because, who wouldn't? For the weather, obviously. Actually moved here for the grandbabies. It was grandbaby at the time. Now it's grandbabies. But now 2 years in, almost exactly 2 years in, a little bit more, I feel like a Kansas City guy. It's a great town. I've met some amazing people, played some great music, and just really thrilled to be here. So this series, if you are joining us for the first time, I'll give you the quick lay of the land. The idea for this came from the fact that my first book, The Radical Leap, came out 20 years ago this year. Came out in 2004, the first edition. It's had a couple of editions since then. And it's had an impact on a good number of people over the years. I'm deeply gratified to say. And I'm also even more deeply gratified to say that as a result of this book being out there, I've met some really incredible people and have made some very dear friends that I would not have made had I never written that book, if my syntax was correct in that sentence. So the whole idea behind this series is I'm bringing these folks out so you can meet them too and hear their stories. So these are the people that I've met over the years that I never would have met without that book. So it's my great pleasure to share them with you and to learn what we can from them. And as part of this whole celebration, as it were, through these series of conversations, we're also offering you a free download of The Radical Leap, of that book. It's an audiobook that I recorded myself so I can talk into your ear very much like I am right now. You can go to radicalleap.org and download that for yourself. And on a quick logistical note, you might hear that I sound a little bit nasally, a little bit raspy, perhaps. It's because I'm getting over some kind of something. I know it's not COVID, but you wouldn't care because you can't catch it through this medium anyway. But something. I'm just getting through, and so I'm having to talk very quietly. And occasionally, you might see me, if you're watching, dabbing at myself. It's not because I'm necessarily overcome with emotion, just overcome with other stuff, I guess you could say. So my guest today is Dan Casetta, who is a brilliant leader, an incredible, I don't even know what to call you, Dan, sales trainer, sales inspirer. He's set records in the organizations that he's run, particularly for Cutco. If you've heard of the famous knives, the Cutco knives, and the Vector company. So I'm really excited to hear Dan's story and learn some gems of wisdom from you, Dan. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Steve, for inviting me on. And I'm coming to you live from San Jose, Silicon Valley, where the 49ers play, and we're known for having lost 2 Super Bowls to the Chiefs here. So
yeah,
you've relocated to the right spot if you're a football fan.
Well, I'll tell you, being in Kansas City, I believe it is a requirement of citizenship to be a Chiefs fan, and I'll tell you, it ain't hard. I mean, these guys. I'm not like a football fanatic. I love watching football, but I'm not the kind of guy that, tracks stats and players and all that. It's never been my thing, but I've always enjoyed watching the game. And these guys, I mean, it's just pure entertainment because I don't know, they keep winning. I don't know how, but they do it like in literally the last second of the game, and not in any conventional way. So yeah, it's listen. I lived in the Bay Area, so I was a 49ers fan. I lived in San Diego, so for a while there I was a Chargers fan. I grew up in Chicago, so I'm a fair weather Bears fan. So this is in this town, man. When there's a football game, when the Chiefs are playing, it's like you got to watch because there's nothing else to do. The whole place freaking shuts down, and everybody's dressed in red, and it's frightening. But anyway, enough about that. So Dan, tell us about your story. So bring us in from a high level, and then we'll dive down.
Sure. So I'm a native here of the Bay Area. I've born and raised here in the San Francisco, San Jose area. My parents are immigrants from Europe. My mom was born in France, my dad in Italy. So I sort of grew up with that influence. And when I was 17 years old, I had just graduated from high school, was working at a movie theater in Burlingame, California, and was getting ready to start college and thought about the opportunity to do something new that I could actually learn something from. And I stumbled upon, truly by dumb luck, an interview to work in the Cutco sales organization. And, the job is selling high-end kitchen products in customers' homes. It's not door to door, but it's, in the home by appointment.
Right.
When I first saw the opportunity, I thought, I don't really know if I can do that. And then that sort of quickly transformed into, well, I think I really need to do this because I was pretty shy at the time and my people skills were not very high. And I viewed this as a relatively low risk opportunity for me to learn some things that would make a difference in my life. And so I took on the opportunity as a 17-year-old and had some success, became a manager with the company while I was still in college. Had some real success with that. And so I knew I liked management. I liked leadership. I liked that side of things a lot more.
Before we get into the leadership side of things. So I just want to put a little punctuation mark on this. So at 17 years old, you decided to pursue this opportunity with Cutco because you didn't have the skills necessary to do it. That's a remarkable level of insight for anybody, let alone a 17-year-old.
Yeah, I don't know that I exactly connected the dots in that manner that way, but I remember, the interview was run where you were met one-on-one at first, and then they put you into a small group so they could do like an hour-long section of explaining what the job is all at once to whatever it was, like 8 people or something. And then they would talk to you at the end one-on-one to talk about whether or not it was going to work out. And I was waiting. I think I was probably the last person that the manager talked to. Perhaps I was the youngest person there. I probably was. And I remember I was waiting for 30 or 40 minutes. And during that time, I had that time to think about what I saw. And I certainly started out with I don't know if I can do this mindset. And then as I was sitting there thinking about it, I was like, this would actually be really a good thing for me to try to do. So I did have that feeling that it would be worth me trying out. I didn't expect that I would have great success. I didn't expect that it would be anything more than a summer job for me. Right. But I certainly didn't expect that I'd be working there for 30 plus years as I have. But that's how it's turned out.
Wow. So that first taste of success that you had starting at 17 years old, what was it pretty quick? Was it a ramp up time? And what did that look like?
Yeah. It was fairly quick. I mean, I struggled for a couple days. My first couple days that I started working, I remember I did 7 sales appointments and only sold on 2. One was to my mom. But then the third day I went to a follow-up session of training, and it was like they flipped the lights on. It was like everything I was doing wrong was answered. And because obviously the company knows like what are the common things people mess up when they're brand new. Sure. So it was like it was all fixed. And the next day I sold 7 out of 7. Wow. And was sort of off and running. I was identified as a candidate for what's called the key staff, which is some of the leaders of the team that have potential to inspire other people and help other people. And eventually, I actually got to give a speech at a meeting. And I remember, I was given a speech that was sort of a personal development oriented topic. It wasn't really directly related to selling Cutco. And I studied a bunch of Tony Robbins stuff to be able to have some great content. And I
Right.
practiced and I spoke and had some really good success with that. And so there was this feeling as I was advancing that I was getting this recognition and appreciation, good feelings of contributing to other people, a lot of things that I just didn't get in my life. I wasn't a cool kid in high school. I wasn't very good athletically until college. And so I didn't have a lot of ways of getting recognition. I was good academically. I was a smart kid with good grades and stuff like that. But I didn't really have a lot of success in the ways that a lot of 17-year-olds would measure success.
Right.
And so Cutco and Vector Marketing, the marketing arm of Cutco, was really the first opportunity for me to have a feeling of being appreciated, being recognized, feeling successful, feeling like I was good at what I was doing. And these were all things that sort of came through over those first couple years before I really got into management and leadership with the company.
Right. So the company recognized in you that you weren't just talented in selling, but you had the ability to inspire other people. And so I'm assuming then that you continued to sell through college. Is that
Yeah, my second summer, I was an assistant manager, and that's kind of where you sell part of the time and you lead and manage part of the time. So I was
right?
working in the office a lot, helping my manager with the interviews and trainings and talking to the sales reps and all the things that managers do. I had he sort of set me free a little bit toward the end of the summer to sell a lot in some big contests we had at the end of the summer. But then I got into training to become a branch manager where you run your own office. And that's pretty much the end of my active sales period, was after the second summer. From that point forward, I was focused almost exclusively on the management leadership side of the business. I ran a branch office 2 summers in a row between my sophomore and junior year of college, and then again between my junior and senior year of college. And the second one, we were number 1 in the company. And so by that point, I was like, oh, I'm really good at this. I might as well do this as a career. I still had 1 year of school left, which I went back and finished
Right.
at Santa Clara University. And then I graduated and started as a full-time, what's called district manager at that time.
So just out of curiosity, what was your major?
My major was management.
Oh, wow.
I actually didn't declare my major until the beginning of my junior year of college. Ironically, I found a sheet that I had filled out in the first day of my Vector training that asked you, what's your major? And I had written economics on that sheet. I don't even remember why I would have written that. But by the time I got to junior year, I was thinking either management, marketing, or finance. And I was leaning toward finance. And I took the first of each of those 3 courses, the first management, the first marketing, the first finance. I hated the finance class, probably because I just didn't get along with the teacher. I loved the management class. Shout out to Professor David Caldwell. And it was great. There was a lot of psychology involved, which I really enjoyed. And I really just decided that was the route that I wanted to go as far as my major.
Right. So, wow. So you got into management and leadership functionally, not as simply as a course of study, from when you were in college. That's
I run my own office when I was 19 years old.
That's let's just say a bit unusual, right? So obviously you found your niche in life, and it wasn't, if I'm hearing you right, it wasn't that your niche in life was knives. It was in people, and they just so happen to sell a great product for the kitchen.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about how I'm assuming that as you were learning, both through your study at Santa Clara University, and you said you read Tony Robbins and all that, as you were kind of filling up your own bucket around the knowledge of what it takes to be a great and effective leader. Did you develop a leadership philosophy of your own over time? And if so, how would you describe it?
Boy, I think that my leadership philosophy has evolved over time. In the early stages, Steve, I would certainly say that there were pieces of my leadership philosophy that were based on work ethic and energy. One of the points in your book, for sure. My original divisional manager was known for just high energy and enthusiasm, and I got a lot of that from him. I also feel like a part of my philosophy was a philosophy of continuous improvement.
Mm-hmm.
That's a principle that Tony Robbins has shared ever since way back in those days, and I bought into that. And so I always felt like each new year or each new campaign, each new goal that was set, I always wanted to strive to exceed what we had done in the past. And we had a really solid trajectory of pretty consistent growth over my first 8 or 10 years as a manager that set us up for a lot of long-term success. And I also feel like one of the things I learned is the idea of a positive focus, meaning whenever anything would come up that was a challenge, we would always be looking for what is the gift in this challenge? What are the solutions that we can enact? How do we move forward from this versus dwelling on the difficulty or woe is me? Why is this happening? That was something that became an important part of my philosophy.
Right.
And I'll add, Steve, that what I've always tried to do as I've learned new things is find ways of sharing those things with the people that were working with me. And so we always had meetings that we would run where we didn't talk about selling knives or anything related to the specific Cutco business. We talked about life and improving as humans, and what were the things we had learned in the last couple of weeks that we could share with each other. And I would be sharing information from the books that I had read, and my 18 and 19-year-old college student sales reps would be excited about reading something from a list I gave them, or from just their own personal discoveries that they could share. And there was this sort of constant culture of personal growth and improvement that permeated the organization. That was certainly a big part of the leadership that I tried to provide.
So if I were to try to, which I will, try to quantify what you just said, the principle that I'm hearing there is that you focused your attention on the personal development of everybody on your team. That's where you put your emphasis. And I'm just trying to imagine as a 17, 18, 19-year-old sales rep out there trying to make some money and thinking that I'm in the business of selling knives, and then knowing that I'm coming to a meeting with you and the team. I'm just imagining that, and knowing that the subject of the conversation is going to be me and how I can get better at being me and how I show up in the world overall. Man, I got to imagine that you're two things. I imagine one is that turnover in that particular business is pretty high, is one assumption that I'm making. but my what I'm predicting out of this is that your particular turnover rate had to be a lot lower than the industry average.
Yeah,
That's
we
my
had a lot of great retention and development through this process for sure.
So your willingness and ability, the collective you as an organization, to deal with challenges and learn from them and rise out of them. Are there any particular specific examples that you could share with us of when you guys really hit a challenge and then found a way out?
Oh, Steve, there are just so many that have become sort of signature stories over the years. When I was a branch manager, which is a summer operation, you basically run from the beginning of May till the end of August, and you're competing with all the other branch managers in the company. There was 110 branches that summer, and we set a goal to be number one. It was my second time doing this, so I felt like I kind of knew the ropes from the first time. So we set a goal to be number one in the company, and from the very first day.
How did you do the first time?
The first time I think we were like 26th.
Okay.
At the end of the summer. We did all right, but nothing spectacular. So we set a goal to be number one from the very first day, the very first interview. We were telling people this is our team goal this year. We want to be the number one branch team in the company. And a team in Wisconsin took the lead from the very start and opened up a pretty sizable lead halfway through the race. We were in fifth place. It's an 18-week race. We were in fifth place after 9 weeks. And then we went from fifth to second pretty fast, but we were still pretty far behind. And we just started closing in and closing in and closing in and closing in. The third from the last week, they beat us. And I think they sort of thought, all right, we got it. We've weathered this storm. But then the last 2 weeks, we just sort of reestablished this charge. And to make a very long story very short, there was over $300,000 in sales that happened in each of those teams for the summer. And when the final numbers came out, we won by $12. And so there was no order that small. Every single order,
right?
Not just every single person, every single order counted. And there were so many neat stories that spun out of that experience. Like a guy that came in was in the hospital with a stomach virus and almost died, came into the office by coincidence the very last night and said, "Hey, did we win?" And we're like, "Dude, this is the last day." He's like, "Oh man, I was in the hospital. I was sick. I almost died." We're like, "Oh, you all right?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm all right." And then I'm like, "Hey, can you sell anything else tonight?" He's like, "Yeah, my sister wants a paring knife, and he's like, I'm like, call her up and sell over the phone right now." And he sold a paring knife over the phone for $28 back then. And, we won by 12, right? Like, it was incredible that guy would come in, right, after being sick for whatever it was, a month and a half. He was AWOL for a month and a half. And he comes walking in like, "Hey, how did we do? Did we win?" I'm like, "It's the last day right now." But he cared, right? He cared. Everybody cared so much about the goal. We established such a great culture around the team success that people really, really cared about it. And it was powerful. The adversity story, though, Steve, that I really wanted to get to happened a few years later. We had been doing very well for about a 3-year stretch. And then we were having a particularly challenging start to the summer, this particular summer. There was a big contest in the middle of the summer. It's sort of like the Super Bowl for our company. It's a 2-week sales contest. It's where everybody goes after it. We had won this contest 3 years in a row, and we were really flailing this particular summer. And another manager called me up and said, "Hey, I want to get some advice from you on how to do well for the push, because, we really want to try to beat Seattle and Tacoma." And he didn't even say, "We really want to beat you guys," right? It was like they were considering us out. And I told my team about this, and I was just on fire. I'm like, these guys think that it's a 3-way race, but they don't know that we're here. We're the champions. We're going to do this. And we borrowed a slogan from the Houston Rockets, who had been sort of overlooked that year in the NBA playoffs. They were the defending champion, but they were the 6th seed in the West and were overlooked. And their slogan was, "Never underestimate the heart of a champion." And we took that slogan and we talked about it every day at all of our events, and we really promoted it with our team that we were going to win this contest. And we ended up winning the contest by a small margin. And when I was up front revealing our total, and our team knew we had won, and I said, "Never underestimate the heart of a champion," our whole team just exploded with just delight and joy that we had been in this difficult spot and we pulled it out and ended up winning the contest. That was a really fun one, and there's a lot of sort of intertwined stories with that one as well.
Yeah. So I'm curious about something. So sales organizations oftentimes have these internal competitions, and there are a couple of different management theories on internal competition in companies. One is that if you have too much of a competitive environment, that it tends to work against you, because people will respond to it by being less helpful to each other, right? So if I'm operating in a zero-sum game kind of an environment, then my thinking is my success is somehow predicated on your not being as successful as I am. Therefore, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that you're not successful, which is the kind of the dark side of the competition. How does that work in the Cutco Vector organization when you look at it across the enterprise?
Yeah. Luckily, Steve, because we work with people initially who are usually 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, they haven't developed the sort of scarcity mindset that you have described through being in the corporate culture that can be more cutthroat. Yeah. So we're able to take them from the start and convince them of a much more healthy spirit of competition, which is, I want to do my best. I want you to do your best. I'll help you. You help me. I'm going to try to beat you. I want to beat you. But if you beat me, I'll be one of the first people to stand up and clap or congratulate you. And that mindset permeates our organization very well. And I think that it sticks all the way up to the highest levels. Even right now, like I'm competing with one of my colleagues for an end of year race that we have a couple more weeks to go here. And it's a close race. And I think we both want to win. And I think we're both talking about it. Just like the race many years ago, it was a branch manager race where I think the other guy thought he had it. I think my colleague probably was expecting that he had it. And I kind of thought, I don't know if we can catch up. But we just had a great week last week. And if we do it again this week, we'll catch him. And it's going to be super close. And this is with, almost $30 million of business over two entire regions. And this same colleague many years ago, I competed with in a very, very close battle. And during that time, like he set a couple records, and one record he set, he called me and he said, "Hey, I wanted to tell you first that we just broke this record." It was a record that I had held that he broke. And it was something that I had tried, a mark that I had tried to achieve. It was $200,000 in sales in 1 week for a team. And I had tried to achieve it a number of times and never did it. And he did it, and he called me first. And I think that's the way that we have promoted competition in our company, right? It's a really healthy spirit of competition.
Yeah, I mean, it's like where we started this conversation with the football thing, right? You see two different kinds of attitudes on the football field at the end of the game, right? You see either the fight breaks out or the hug across the across the proverbial field happens, and it's all in the attitude of the individual players, but it's also an expression of the attitude and the culture of the team, right?
Yeah. I've got a 7-year-old boy who's playing sports, and I love giving him examples of how to win and lose properly, right? The handshake line at the end of a hard-fought hockey series is always an inspirational thing to watch, right? And then when you see also guys that do stuff that's a little bit showboaty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes my son is like, "Oh, I saw that." I'm like, "I don't like that move. That's not a good move, right? That's not something that we do, right, on our teams or in our family." And I just think that this whole idea of how to win and lose with grace is an important part of elevating yourself. And competition is such a key part of bringing the best out of yourself. It just gives you an extra reason to do what you already want to do anyway. And I think everybody should embrace that level of friendly competition, particularly in a place where your win is not somebody's loss necessarily. Right.
Yeah. So that it is not it's not a zero-sum game that you're playing, right? I mean, I suppose it is if there's only one winner and one prize or whatever it is, but in the striving for everybody to get there, all those boats are rising.
Exactly.
Right? And
I think that going all the way back to that branch race when I was in college, the two of us, made each other a lot more money because we existed and we were there to compete with each other.
Yeah.
And in the end, it's not about who's number one and who's number two. It's a lot more about what did you achieve? How much did you grow? How much did you improve? What did it bring out of you personally? Right? Those are more important things because those are long-term lasting qualities that affect every other goal you set, both personally and professionally, forever.
So 17 years old to now, 30 years at the same company, which is really remarkable nowadays. So tell us
36 years now.
36 years.
Yeah. Can you believe that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not much more unbelievable than 30 years. I mean, either way, it's pretty amazing, which is a testament to both you and the organization, certainly. Where are you now? So what is your responsibility now? What's your span of influence in the organization?
At this point, I run the Western region for the company, which is the Western states, essentially the coastal states plus Nevada. And there's 6 regions in the company, 7 if you include Canada. And so there's 6 or 7 of me here in the company. It's sort of like a regional vice president role in most companies, what they would call a regional vice president.
Now, and part of what you're doing nowadays, you give a lot of talks, right? You're still focusing a lot of your attention on education and inspiration and all that. Do you do that company wide or just in your own region?
I do it mostly in my own region, although we do have some corporate events from time to time. And there's a lot of cross-pollination that goes on where we're assisting and helping other people throughout the company. So, but I'm primarily responsible for my own region. I've got a team of divisional executives that run each of the geographic areas throughout the West, and they each have their teams. So I help with developing them and also with a lot of the events that our sales reps come to throughout the region during the year.
And did every one of your leaders start selling in homes?
Yeah, that's one thing about the Cutco Vector organization is that everybody starts in the same spot and moves up based on performance. It's just how we've always operated, and for better or for worse, it's what we do.
So everybody understands the experience of sitting in a stranger's home, even if it was only for one summer 36 years ago. I imagine that's something that you remember in your DNA and never forget.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Although everybody's a referral, so it's sort of a friend of a friend that you're seeing, and they're not really a stranger so much as
it's not like
somebody they didn't know.
Hey, anybody home? You need a knife?
Yeah, we haven't done that since like the 1970s, but
right. I imagine it'd be hard to recruit people to do that. Although we got people knocking on our door all the time selling stuff, and it just amazes me that people are still doing that.
Yeah.
And I try to be friendly, but because I'm a friendly guy, but I'm not always particularly gracious. you know, and I feel sorry
Understood.
for them. Okay, so one of the things you said earlier is you developed a habit early on, and that continues to this day of taking in knowledge from where you can get it, wherever you can find it, reading books and attending seminars, and I'm assuming watching videos and all that, which leads us to how you and I connected.
Mhm.
So you are an example of something that I've described a couple of times in this series, of somebody that I never would have met had it not been for books that I've written. And I didn't even know that Dan Casetta existed somewhere on the planet until somehow we connected, because there was something in that book that whatever. So I'd love for you to tell that story, because after all, this is the Leap Hour, and we are, we're giving away the free download of the Radical Leap audiobook. So I'd love to hear your experience in all of that. Just tell us that story, if you would.
Sure. I don't know what year it was, Steve, when I first came across the Radical Leap, but I came across your book. I've been an avid reader and student of personal development ever since the Tony Robbins and Jim Rohn days and Zig Ziglar.
Yeah.
And so I read the Radical Leap. I really liked it. A lot of the principles, the four key tenets, I guess you could say, resonated for me a lot. So I read all your books at that point. The Radical Edge, Greater Than Yourself. I mean,
Right.
these became sort of textbooks for me as a leader. And I started to share the Radical Leap in my organization. I remember having one of my managers, shout out to John Ross Nafuente, gave a message at one of my events about the Radical Leap and shared it with my entire organization from his perspective. And that was great. And over the years, I've distributed quite a few copies of the book to people in my organization. I wrote a blog a number of years ago about the 10 books that have changed my life the most, and I had the Radical Leap on that list. And recently, I was having my assistant buy some books to give away to our people. I like to send books out for birthdays or other things to people in my organization, and I said, I want to get the Radical Leap. Can you reach out to the author and find out if we can get some signed copies? And so she dug around and found her way to Veronica.
Right.
And we were able to get you to sign some copies that we can give out, and that's how we have sort of connected even further now.
Yeah.
And then we also have the mutual connection of Dr. Barry Posner,
Right.
who is Jim Kouzes' partner. Jim is one of your biggest mentors in life. Barry taught Dr. Posner. I would have called him back then. Now I say Barry, but he taught at Santa Clara back when I was there. And now he's been very, very high up at running different departments at Santa Clara University for many years. And now recently I accepted an opportunity to be part of an advisory board at Santa Clara University, led by him.
Oh, really? Very
so,
cool.
Yeah. So we've got that mutual connection as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So yeah, I just kind of had a flashback on that blog post that you wrote. I think when you guys reached out to us to get signed copies of the books, which I'm always happy to do and grateful that people ask for it. But I think that's when you shared that blog post with us as well.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how what that feels like. I mean, the Radical Leap was listed in a book called The 100 Best Business Books of All Time. And so, we still crow about that. One of the So I'm always, very careful to say, yeah, so it was listed in the 100 best business books of all time, and it wasn't my list, just so you know. It was not a list that I created. And to see that book on the list alongside the Leadership Challenge by Kouzes and Posner, my mentors, was indescribable, and still is.
Yeah.
So just from the heart, thank you so much for making the effort to reach out to me. Otherwise, we never would have connected. So if you look at the elements of LEAP, or the tenets of LEAP, or whatever we call them, framework: love, energy, audacity, and proof. So in the context of your business, you talked about energy a little bit before. I can hear the audacity of the goals that you set, and how you've proven yourself right from the very beginning, each step along the way in your own career. Where does love fit into the equation? So how do you guys cultivate love in the way you do business?
I think love starts with loving what you do, and thinking about what is your purpose in what you do and what's the impact of what you do. And so I feel like that's an easy one for us at Cutco Vector, because we make a profound difference on so many young people at a truly formative time in their lives.
Yeah.
We're a lot like a bridge between formal education and what it takes to succeed in the real world. So it's easy to feel good about what I do every day. But specifically, how do we incorporate love in what we do? I remember a lot of years ago, a guy that was one of my colleagues and competitors that I really admired, talking about building a big organization. And he said, the number one key is love your people. And I remembered hearing him say that and thinking about, what does that mean to me? How does that apply to me? Part of that is to prioritize the success of the individual over the success of the group. Prioritize individual success over my own success. And Jim Rohn calls this enlightened self-interest. It's to give yourself in the service of others. It's that at times you will make decisions that might not seem like they're in your interest today or this week or this month, but you're making decisions that are in the best interest of the individual on your team. And that when you do that 100 times over, 1,000 times over, it is so much more in the interest of yourself in the long run to approach things that way. It's never bad to make decisions that are in the best interest of individual people. And so if you really love the people on your team, you're thinking about them and what's best for them. You don't have this ulterior motive in the back of your mind of, oh, how can I manipulate this situation so that it can end up being what I want? It's just, hey, what's going to be best for this person? What's going to be best for this person? Cutco, Steve, is a family-owned business, which really values the community in Olean, New York, a little town in Western New York where the factory is near Buffalo. And they view that community as their family. They make so many decisions there that are in the interest of the people there, right? I mean, if the company wanted to be as profitable as possible and that was the only interest, they'd move the factory to another country. Right. They wouldn't have it in the United States, right? During COVID, we paid all of our employees in the factory for like 8 weeks while they weren't showing up in full. These are the kinds of things that the company does because they value family and individual. Right. So we try to create this family feel and sort of culture of love. And some people might poke holes in that and say that, maybe we keep people for too long, or we're too lenient on somebody who isn't succeeding at the highest level because we're really trying to prop them up and help them. But the other side of that is that when anybody is considering their career path or what they're going to do next or how long they're going to stay with our company, they kind of know that's a part of what they get when they're here. And that's probably a part of what they don't get in most corporate cultures. So it's an attractive thing for people to be with us and stay with us when they know that there's that culture of love and that sort of family feel.
Wow. It's, it's a great example of what I often say to people, is that, when people say, well, this concept of love at work, I mean, that's very, provocative, and oftentimes they imply that, I'm the guy that made it up. They kind of started talking about it, which is just patently not true, because nothing that I've ever written about is something that I made up. It's all based on observation, right? I just shine a spotlight on it in my own unique, twisted sort of way. But it's because of companies like yours. It's observing those things that really work, beyond the so-called conventional wisdom of how a business is, quote unquote, supposed to operate. So what you just described, Dan, is it's also very, very much a greater than yourself kind of approach. So the GTY approach, for those who haven't read the book, Greater Than Yourself is my third book, and it's really, traditionally speaking, we can say it's about mentoring, but the whole idea behind it is that the greatest leaders become the greatest leaders by making others greater than themselves. That our success comes from our ability to lift other people up, and that's exactly what you just described. For all those reasons, if I've got year after year after year, and decade after decade after decade of a track record of lifting people up, doesn't that reflect positively on me as well? Of course it does. I get a reputation for being the person that creates superstars. So so to say that helping somebody else is going to diminish my opportunities is it's just total bullshit. It's exactly the opposite. That my greatest opportunities come from my ability to lift other people up, which is a very direct and very obvious and quantifiable act of love. And of course, the other thing that happens, as you just described, is not only do you get a reputation individually, but if you have a company that does this as a matter of routine, where people do this for each other, then you gain a reputation collectively as a company, and therefore you attract and keep the best talent. And I can't imagine anybody would fault you guys for bringing somebody in at 17, 18 years old, showing them a career path, and then having them stick around for 36 years. I mean, where is the downside in that? And they're not there because they have to be there. They're not indentured. You're not an indentured servant. You're there because you want to be there, because you're really doing what you love, and you're helping other people to do that. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
I should say it's notable. I don't think it's remarkable. I think it's what's remarkable is that not every place does it. That to me is truly remarkable. I just don't freaking get it.
Yeah.
It's so obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah, Steve, I started a mastermind group about 8 years ago. And the way it started was I wanted to bring together the 12 most successful people I'd ever met in my life, put them in a room, have dinner, and talk about business and life. And it's sort of taken on a life of its own over the last 8 years. I've had maybe 45 different people come to the event, all notable leaders in the Silicon Valley, some extremely notable leaders in the Silicon Valley, all 1 in a million in their fields. And one of the nights we were talking about this issue of culture in a business.
Yeah.
And I was describing how I feel like one of the most important keys to culture in a business is how you bring this feeling of love and appreciation and just this family feel into the team. And I was talking about one of the keys I employ for that is the idea of ongoing personal development, always sharing things that are not specifically related to the job, but are more related to developing the person holistically. And there were a number of people in the room that were like, oh man, we do that at this company. Or there was a famous podcaster in the room who's like, oh man, I love this. and he had me on his podcast to talk about it. And we discussed it in detail. And he was like echoing. And there was a couple guys, though, that were like arms crossed. And like one of them, who was a big corporate lawyer, was like, I don't buy into this stuff. Like when I was, growing up in my company, all we wanted to do was make money. Everybody just wanted to make money. And that was like the most important thing. How do we make the most money? We didn't care about any of this stuff. And not everybody buys in, right? To the idea that developing the individual holistically, loving the person, that creates this great success. And it's tough for me to see that not everybody buys into it. I think some people who are in the world of publicly held corporations that are sort of beholden to these other interests don't necessarily see it the same way as we do in a place like Cutco, where we're not beholden to anybody's other interests. So
yeah, I think a lot of it is a self-perpetuated myth, because what somebody like that, that corporate lawyer guy and other folks of his ilk, for one thing, let's be clear about that. They're not my clients. Right. That person is never going to hire me and my team to come in and help them with this love stuff. So,
right.
And I wouldn't want to either, because this is not about converting people. It's about taking people who already get it, just need help, to really implement it. But what it does is it belies this myth, or it reveals this myth, which is that somehow it's one or the other, right? We weren't concerned about love. We were concerned about making money. Well, that implies that those are mutually exclusive pursuits. And what you guys are demonstrating is that no, that is how you make more money. When you cultivate that kind of environment, we're in a business after all. You compete for the numbers, right? You just told us several stories about competing for the numbers. Nobody's saying that making money is not important. What we're saying is that the way you make that happen in a meaningful way, time after time, is by cultivating love. That's how you do it. And that's a mind challenge for some people. I was going to use a different word, but it seemed a little bit too harsh.
It's PG-13 here, Steve.
Yeah, PG-13. That's right. We'll stick with shit and we'll leave it there. So the again, I think what's so important about the work that you're doing, the way that you're doing it, Dan, is it goes, as you've just described with your mastermind group, for example, goes way beyond what you guys are doing at Cutco Vector. You serve as an example for the rest of us, right? And personally, I'm grateful, because when I'm out there on my soapbox about how important this stuff is, I've got to, I point to the evidence. I'm not making this up. Look at this company. Look at that company. Look at Cutco Vector. Look at Dan Casetta. Look at the way that he does it. Look at the results that he gets. And then I'm sure you can give me, plenty of examples of people who are tremendously, quote unquote, successful on the bottom line that display none of these things. And they get there in a brutal sort of a fashion. And so when people say to me, well, what about them? I say, well, that's too bad. I mean, all I can say is I can't prove it, but I think they would have done a hell of a lot better if they did it differently.
Yeah. Yep. Stephen Covey once said, have you ever reached the top of the ladder of success only to find it was leaning on the wrong wall?
Wrong wall, yeah.
And I remember that and thought, there's a lot of different ways to get to where we want to get to in life. And some ways leave you feeling great when you get up there. And other ways leave you looking around and going, wait, is this all there is?
Yeah. And, the beautiful thing about that is that wall is not necessarily about the kind of business that you're in. It's like you're not going to wake up one day and say, oh man, I've been leaning on the knife wall for all these years. If only I was leaning on the software wall. Mm-hmm. It's got nothing to do with that, as you demonstrated. These principles apply in any industry, in any business. It's not. So the wrong wall is to me, it's discovering that you've been pursuing the wrong value set, the wrong priorities over the years.
Mm-hmm.
That was, by the way, my judicious use of the mute button, so you didn't have to hear me cough. Just to be clear. So
strong move.
Yeah, it comes from sitting in front of a computer all day and talking, knowing how to use a mute button, which I will do again right now. See, that was your opportunity to fill in a little bit with some patter while I was.
I should have just jumped in right there.
That's kind of right. So Dan, as we wrap this up, what final words do you have for folks to take away from our conversation today? Last words of advice.
Boy, well, for sure, one thing I would say is download the Radical Leap. If it's you're getting the free audiobook, you might as well jump in there and get that. I also feel like your other books are great, Steve. We're stocking up on Greater Than Yourself right now to give away as gifts to a lot of our people over the next few months. And I think that's something that we're excited about. I guess what I would say to leave is that leadership is a real privilege that one earns. And it's also a responsibility that I think we should all take seriously in the world, because the world needs people who set positive examples, who spread great ideas, and who have a powerful impact on a lot of people. I've oftentimes encouraged people to write down who are the 5 most influential people you've ever met in your life. Maybe they start with their father and their mother and whoever else. But thinking about who those people are and sending those people a note to let them know so they feel recognized, but then flipping that thought around and thinking how many people would have you on their list.
Right.
I bet there's a lot of people that have Steve Farber on that list. And I know, having worked with so many young people directly over the years, there's a lot of people that would have me on their list. And that's a real blessing.
Yeah.
That I put a lot of work into having having that become possible. So I think that's a great part of the fulfillment we can all get, is when we know we've made that much of an impact on a lot of people.
That is a ladder that has been leaning on the right wall, for sure. So when you say people that have been that are influential, you mean influential in your own life, not an influencer like a Instagram influencer.
No, not like Mr. Beast, although he's pretty cool. But people who've directly impacted you.
Yeah, that is a beautiful idea to leave us with, particularly in this holiday season when we're having this conversation. It's a great time to reflect on who you're grateful for, not just what you're grateful for, and let them know. That's fantastic. Dan, thank you so much. Do me a favor, hang out just for a second after we say goodbye to folks. And everybody, thank you for tuning in to the Leap Hour. We will see you next time. Thank you for joining me on the Leap Hour. Hope you enjoyed our time together. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share the heck out of this thing. Also, don't forget to get your free copy of the Radical Leap audio at radicalleap.org. We'll see you next time on the Leap Hour.